Eddie Jones is known as the master of the upset. This is especially true in World Cups, where his Wallabies in 2003 beat the heavily favoured All Blacks. In 2019, England beat New Zealand in a comprehensive performance. And in 2015, he masterminded what is still possibly the greatest upset in sport of all time. Jones achieved this with a combination of focus and a fuck ton of study. In 2013, Jones called Graham Henry up and actively said, "We are going to target the Springboks. We are going for South Africa." Which is why Japan were able to put out a performance that was even made into a film. It's a brilliant film, by the way. It's on Amazon Prime. I would definitely recommend it. England applied this logic to the All Blacks. England under Jones were designing this game plan to use against New Zealand for 2.5 years. And as we know, it turned out to be pretty effective. It produced England's greatest performance since 2003. However, this performance inherently compromised England. It was so well designed that it was like NOS on a race car. It gave England the perfect tactics and therefore the perfect performance to put in against New Zealand. But these tactics were only super effective against New Zealand. Of course, the media went crazy, and rightly so, but this was a performance on NOS, and therefore the same tactics wouldn't work to the same extent that they did against Steve Hanson's men. This was England's Everest. It was the game that Eddie Jones had been preparing them for 2.5 years, and as such, when they completed it, subconsciously, there would have been this feeling in the background. No matter how much they tried it, their Everest, their objective, was beaten. This meant that their key tactical advantage and their emotional intensity was not as great as it needed to be a week later. We will talk about the final in a later video, but for today, it's about New Zealand. Free-phase strike moves are the bread and butter of the set-piece attack. Not many people know this, but their origin came from the Brumbies under Eddie Jones. The Brumbies would target 2 strong points in the defensive line over 2 phases. These 2 phases would reveal a weakness in the defensive line, which the Brumbies would then exploit on the 3rd phase. Jones brought this philosophy to Japan. The first carry would be a hard carry off a back, followed by another carry to target the folding forwards. The 3rd phase would then be used to target the weakness in the defensive line. In this case, a loop play by which the attack is designed to target the inside shoulder of Pat Lambie, the South African 10. We see this same philosophy followed against Ireland in the Six Nations. The hard carry on the angle from Tuolangi keeps the forward pack, originally in the scrum, on one side of the field. The 2nd phase is a carry off 9 designed to target the folding forwards by Itoje here. These 2 phases are near identical to the Brumbies example, followed by the 3rd phase screenplay designed to put Mako Vunipola, one of England's best carriers, against the Ireland 10, Johnny Sexton. This is important because England used the exact same framework to target Richie Mo'unga on the 3rd phase strike move. This information was important because it was used to target Mo'unga. Mo'unga throughout the World Cup campaign was assigned to the 13 channel, and as seen, he was beaten here. England used this information to target Mo'unga on the 3rd phase strike move. Following the principle, Tuolangi takes the hard carry, followed by the folding forwards, after which the 10 is then intended to be exploited. England don't disappoint and put Daly up against him where he gets to the outside shoulder, beating him like he was against Ireland. This break led to England's try. Later on, we see the same principle again in action. The hard carry comes off Tuolangi, and then a quick pick and go to target the folding forwards. From here, the 10 will be targeted, and New Zealand know it. The pass goes out, and Ford crabs over to target the outside shoulder of Mo'unga. This, in turn, activates Ardie Savea, sprinting over to try and cover him and assist him in the tackle, opening the gap for the scissors run. These breaks gave England valuable territory from which they were able to generate penalties, and then slot them to get the game further. However, this was offset piece. In phase play, England did something else that this guy did that really helped them against New Zealand. Aaron Smith is the best passing scrum half in the world, but more importantly, he is responsible for the All Blacks' fringe defence. If you look at him, he is always either behind or very near to the ruck, organising the fold and the distribution of the All Black fringe defenders. This was shown in England's first try in 2018 and is originally taken from the Crusaders approach, where we see Justin Marshall here being exploited, and is namely a reason why Brumbies play is so effective against the All Blacks. The principle is if you target the 9 via inside balls, you can take him out of the game and therefore compromise the fringe defence of the All Blacks, as shown very effectively by Argentina. If the fringes aren't numbered properly, Aaron Smith can fill the gap, leaving the hole behind very exploitable for opposition pick and goes. This principle is why we saw England operating inside balls and rapid fire pick and goes, much like the Brumbies of old. England were honing this pattern in test matches so that when they were finally ready to play the All Blacks, you had guys like Manu going quickly with the rapid pick and go, followed immediately by Billy Vunipola, doing exactly the same thing. England also used their unders lines, where heavy carriers would come in hard off 9 to target the fringes of the ruck. Against Wales, this meant running into very, very strong forwards. Against the All Blacks, however, well, it involved running into Aaron Smith. By consistently targeting him here, they not only got gain line, but they were able to make him tackle, inadvertently losing his efficiency in other areas of the game. Now, realistically, we can't get away without mentioning the All Blacks shoot. The All Blacks' defence comprises of a shoot portion, where the 3rd/4th man off the ruck will move forward to catch the free pod behind the gain line. This is remarkably effective at stymieing opposition one-out carries, needed for go-forward ball. England's simple solution to this was to take a step inside. The lead forward in the pod would inadvertently bypass the dominant hit and therefore always gain gain line. It was remarkably simple, but remarkably effective. We can even see it in training. England's backs here are automatically taking a step off the right foot to drive back to the ruck. We see it first here with Henry Slade, and then after that McConaughey lines up, and guess what? He goes off his right foot, going and targeting the inside shoulder of the dominant defender. This is something England used absolutely repeatedly throughout this game. Repeatedly. Their tight 5 forwards were consistently moving back against the grain, getting inside the shooter and therefore always gaining ground. Combine this tactic with the use of England's power carriers and it kept the All Blacks under constant pressure. England crossed the whitewash 3 times in total. Now, whilst this one was definite crossing and not a try at all, one was definite and another was a lot closer. This made use of the All Blacks overrush. Against Australia here, we can see the All Blacks get the shove on. Their defence moved forward and inadvertently opened the hole for Genia to dummy and shoot straight through, which eventually leads to a try. In this case, the defence do overrush before the balls come out, leading Hooper with a very easy run-in. This principle led to England's second disallowed try. Ben Youngs is waiting here for the forwards to commit to the maul. First Sam Cane, and secondly, Cody Taylor and Ardie Surveyor. The second they commit, he reaches in to get the ball because he knows they won't be there to stop his run. The overrush happens, and with the same dummy, he goes through. Now, one might think here that Jones is still a very cunning fox, but the next one really proves it beyond doubt. This has directly to do with the fold of the All Black forwards near the line. The Wallabies are camped on the All Black line, repeatedly running the same way pick and go, a very standard ball retention attacking pattern. The genius, however, is the Australian exploit of this fold. We can see 2 All Black forwards fold over to the open side before they fill up the blind side. Australia use this with a quick pick and go to target. England knew about this overfold, as they scored a try using the exact same method. They knew the All Blacks would overfold to cover the same way pick and go, opening this hole. We can see it here. The hole hasn't even formed yet Manu jumps over to the other side because he knows it will appear. And guess what? It does, and the try is scored. This is what 2.5 years of preparation looks like, and it builds nicely into the next phase. Mick Byrne is the brainchild of this tactic, a tactic which has clenched many games for the All Blacks out the fire. This tactic is when an All Black 10 kicks very short, with a chaser going up usually in Kieran Reid to knock the ball back, generating possession to go forward in attack. It won them this game against Australia, and against the Lions resulted in a penalty that should have stuck and should have netted the All Blacks the series, a decision which would have sent Ken Owens into pretty much certain exile. England nullified this with the use of Tom Curry, seen here being interviewed by God. Again, what they did was simple yet elegant. They consistently put Tom Curry behind the jumper, meaning when the ball came back, it came back to Tom Curry. From here, they would kick back into the All Black half, gaining territory and robbing the All Blacks of momentum. They did this a lot, and every time Tom Curry was there, ready to pick up the ball and go to ground. From there, the ball is passed back, in this case to George Ford, and George Ford does what he does best, puts in a massive kick that puts the pressure back on the All Blacks. Next, we look at defence. John Mitchell created a defensive masterclass in this game, which was sensational. It was based around 4 key principles, as far as I can tell. Number effectively, maintain defensive depth for the 2 passes, key rush to target the free pod off 10, and last but not least, make sure you stand a couple of feet behind the offside line to make sure you rush with speed. If you didn't catch that, don't worry, we are going to go into these in quite a bit of detail. The first principle was to make sure that you numbered effectively on both sides of the ruck. To explain why, New Zealand ran a 2-free attack system with a 2 pod off 9 and a 3 pod off 10 behind with the screen pass. This is incredibly important because it shows why the All Blacks are trying to get more midfield rucks. They hardly ever hit the 2 pod, only the 3 pod. They do this because once the pod hits the midfield, they can split the field with 2 playmakers for a 2-sided attack. As we will see, this is incredibly similar to the England attacking dynamics followed by George Ford and Owen Farrell. This not only allows them to pick either side of the field as they choose, but once they're there, they can then set up another 2-free pod to exploit the wide channels if they've overcommitted defenders. The next focus was ensuring they kept enough depth that would enable them to handle attacks outside the 13 channel. As we can see here, off first phase, the English line outside of George Ford are hanging way back. We can see it here, where they are again hanging way back. This is due to the 2-pass dynamic. After 2 passes, the All Blacks have a chance of holding it wide, which is why, after 2 passes, England stop rushing and start drifting. It's shown very clearly here, where on the second pass, England start drifting and actually start going backwards as to ensure that they are covering the wide attack. On the first pass, they rush. On the second pass, they stop and they start moving laterally to cover the outside options. This was not where they were going to make ground and push the defence back. That comes next. England's key rush strategy was to target the free pod off 10. As we hopefully remember, the All Blacks ran a 2-free system, where the pass would go behind to the 10 to the free pod. England gambled on this information for the defensive rush and their ability to take the gain line away from the All Blacks. As we can see, when the ball hits the pod, it's Sam Underhill making the tackle. In another instance, it's Neutralizing on Brodie Retallick. In the next instance, it's Sam Underhill coming in for a tackle on Kieran Reid. England basically missed out the 2-pod to actually ensure that they were using Tom Curry, Sam Underhill and Manu Tuolangi to make these hits on the 3-pod. England consistently lined up either one of Sam Underhill, Tom Curry or Manu Tuolangi opposite the 3-pod. This is because all 3 are incredibly fast, incredibly powerful and therefore perfect for this role. As also noted by Graham from the dead ball area, England stood behind the offside line by at least a few feet. There are a few reasons for this, yet one of them is due to something that the All Blacks did in 2018 with their rapid-fire pick-and-go pattern, much like the English pattern you might say. Due to the speed and intensity of the All Black carriers, they consistently made ground because the rush defence couldn't affect them as they were just picking and going immediately. It gave them gain line at a rate that catch and pass just could not achieve. To counter this, England combined their double hit with the knowledge that they needed to stand behind the offside line to get momentum. The England forwards folded round, always making sure that they presented a double hit option right off the line to stop the All Blacks making gains that they had made in 2018. And, as noted by Graham, it led to this intercept that nearly, on a good day, would have led to another try. Under former attack coach Wisemantel, England ran a 1-3-2-2 or a 1-3-3-1 pattern. Whilst Ford was usually deployed behind the 3-pod, they could use Farrell as either an operator next to the 2-pod, or, as shown next, a second receiver role positioned behind the 2-pod, who could also come through as a deep runner to surprise the defence and take the pass from George Ford. This is the option that they attempted and failed to do against New Zealand, that they did do against Ireland. However, the real beauty of this was the Ford-Farrell daily axis and their ability to constrict and stretch the defensive line. The key principle behind this was that any 2 of these 3 playmakers had to be on one side of the field. Ford in this was key. Ford would move, and whoever was assigned to him, be it Farrell or Daly, would move over to his side so that they could provide the second receiver pass-back option. If Ford moved, Daly moved, as always to provide him with a second receiver option. If this option wasn't on, then on the other side of the ruck you had Owen Farrell, who was ready to take the pass and run that line in order to generate a 2-sided attack at all times. This is a key reason why Elliot Daly replaced Mike Brown, as he has these playmaking abilities to operate as second receiver on either side of the field. This is where it gets really interesting. Once England had created the space, either via carry, kick, or passing, they needed the ability to exploit this space. This is where the Ford-Farrell Daly axis came in. After the set-piece play, we see England go through their sequence of off-9 carries to generate space. The result is the Ford-Farrell-Daly axis altogether. At this point, Ford knows that the blind side is not exploitable. As such, they run an inside step off 9 to buy time for Ford, Farrell and Daly to move over and exploit the open side, getting Anthony Watson very close. It was in essence a very simple game plan by England. Run your forwards in tight off 9 to suck in defenders and then use your distributors to get the ball to the created space. Another little trick that Jones brought to the party was his use of the short side. Jones made use of this, in particular with the free phase dynamic offset piece and even in phase play. Jones ran his 2 phases off 9 hard into sets of forwards. After this, the forwards actually provide Ford a screen to run the blindside hit, using Billy Vunipola to make considerable ground on the Irish defence. It is simply a means of scrambling the opposition defence into their 15-metre channel, making the open side for the next phase all the more exploitable. Here, we see Jamie George and Tupod do his inside step to get inside the shooter. Ford then switches, taking the pass and putting Tom Curry into the hole that gains ground and puts England on the front foot, making the open side very exploitable on the next phase. This game was Eddie Jones' focus for England for 4 years. Everything that England were doing was designed to target New Zealand weaknesses and designed to target the flaws in the All Blacks. It was simply Eddie's plan and, forgive the pun, but all coming together. That performance, however, was only going to be that good against New Zealand. The tactics that had been grained into them weren't going to be as successful a week later against South Africa, who, in all pain and honesty, emerged that game as worthy champions and worthy winners. The same tactics wouldn't work, and that is why Rassie and Sia are to be congratulated. South Africa's defence nullified England's Brumbies-style tactics perfectly, and that is why they went home with the World Cup.